I've driven rural Arkansas more than most people who grew up there. My territory is a 12-county stretch through the hill country northeast of Little Rock. Ag supply accounts, farm equipment dealers, a handful of co-ops scattered off county roads with names that don't show up on GPS. On a heavy week, I put 600 miles on the company truck. I know those roads the way you know a drive you've made so many times it stops being scenery and becomes distance to manage. You track things automatically, which towns have speed traps, where the elevation changes make your radio cut out, where the gas stations are, because on 100 miles of county highway at night, there are maybe 4, and you learn them fast, or you learn to check your gauge before you leave the last town. The station on Highway 9, about 30 miles north of Batesville, was just part of the route. I'd been stopping there for 2 years. One pump, cinder block building the color of old bone. A hand-painted sign above the door that said Snacks Gas Lottery in faded blue letters. The inside smelled like old coffee and whatever they burned in the space heater in winter. The cashier was a quiet man, late 50s, maybe older, who I'd seen enough times to recognize but never had a conversation with beyond the total and the receipt. The last Tuesday of every month, I run a loop that finishes in that stretch of Highway 9, and depending on how the afternoon goes, I'm coming through after dark. Late October, almost 11:30 at night. The roads were dry, no traffic. I needed gas and I needed a bathroom, and I pulled in the way I'd pulled in a dozen times before, engine low, gravel under the tires. That's when I noticed the camera. Most stations that size have one camera at the register, maybe one on the pump. This place had a single camera mounted on the far corner of the building, and it was not aimed at the pumps. It was not aimed at the parking area. It was pointed at the road, specifically at the 2-lane section of Highway 9 that ran north, the direction I'd come from. I registered it and filed it under bad installation job and went inside. The cashier looked up when I came through the door. Not a greeting, just the look. Then he asked me which direction I'd come from. Not where I was headed, which direction I'd come from. I told him, south to north down Highway 9 out of Mountain View. He nodded, a single, deliberate nod, and said, "You pass anybody parked on the shoulder, maybe 5 miles back, north end of the county stretch. Could have their hazards on, could not." I thought about it. I hadn't. I told him that. He did something with his mouth that wasn't quite a response and started ringing up my water and gas. I asked for the restroom key, and he pointed toward the back without looking up. The bathroom was in a short hallway behind the cooler section, stacked cases of motor oil on both sides, single bulb fixture overhead. Standard setup. I was washing my hands when I heard tires on the gravel outside. Heavy vehicle. Diesel engine with a low, wet idle. Then the cashier's voice changed. It's difficult to explain if you haven't heard someone shift registers under pressure. He'd been minimal the entire time I was in the store. Flat, distracted, the kind of person whose default is to use the fewest words available. What I heard through the thin drywall was a different kind of voice. Still quiet. Quieter, actually. But in the way you go quiet when you're being very careful about what you say and how you say it. I couldn't make out his side of it clearly. The other man's voice was lower, harder to read. I heard fragments. The cashier said something about the road. The other man's voice got slightly louder, and then clear enough that I stepped back from the sink. Was that his car? I turned the water off. There was one other car in that lot. Mine. I stood at the sink in that bathroom and let the shape of it take form. The camera pointed at the road coming north. The cashier asking which direction I'd come from before I'd said a word. The truck pulling in within 10 minutes of my arrival. A man asking whether the car outside belonged to the person who had just driven in from the north. The conversation continued for another 2 minutes. I caught nothing else I could use. Then I heard the truck's engine rev and the gravel shift and the sound move away. 20 seconds later, the cashier knocked on the bathroom door. His voice was exactly the same as before, flat, careful. He said, "They've gone. Take Route 9 instead of the highway when you leave. Don't stop until you're in Batesville." Just like that, like he was telling me the pump closest to the road was out of order. I opened the door. The lot was empty. No truck, no sound, nothing. The cashier was back behind the register, not looking at me. I noticed for the first time that mounted below the cigarette display was a small monitor, maybe 8 inches across, showing a feed from outside, from the road camera, the one pointed at Highway 9 going north. I asked him what was going on. He didn't look away from the monitor. Route 9, he said. Don't stop. I drove Route 9. It adds 20 minutes to the drive, and it winds through the back of the hill country with no lights and no towns. But I drove it, and I didn't stop, and I didn't check my rear view more than I had to. When I hit the Batesville city limits, I pulled into a truck stop off the interstate with a lit-up canopy and 4 vehicles in the lot and a teenager behind the counter watching something on his phone, and I sat in the parking lot for close to 15 minutes before I went inside to pay for my gas. I didn't tell anyone about that night. The explanation I built for myself was this. A regular customer had broken down somewhere on the highway, and the truck driver was someone from the area looking for them. And the cashier's version of a warning was just bad small-town communication. That explanation worked for about 2 weeks. My coworker covers my territory when I'm out. We were eating lunch, and he was half reading something on his phone, and he said, almost as an aside, "You see that thing on Highway 9? Body in a car north of Batesville." He turned his phone so I could read the headline. A vehicle had been found on the shoulder of Highway 9, pulled partially into the grass, approximately 5 miles north of the Fulton County line. It had been there for at least 3 days before anyone reported it. Details were limited. No victim identification, no suspects named. The investigation was active. 5 miles north, exactly where the cashier had asked if I'd seen anyone parked. I've spent a lot of time thinking about that camera and what it was actually for. Nothing in that lot was worth watching. 1 pump and a gravel turnout. But a camera pointed at the northbound approach with a monitor behind the register means someone had been running that system long enough to know that watching the road was more useful than watching the lot. That takes time to set up. That takes a reason. What I can't work out is which side of it the cashier was on. He told me to take Route 9. He told me not to stop. That reads like help. But I don't know what he said to the man in the truck before he knocked on the bathroom door. I don't know what their arrangement was. I don't know what it cost him, if anything, to send me the long way home that night. What I know is there was a body in a car on that highway, parked there for 3 days, and someone at a gas station 30 miles away knew enough to ask about it before the police did. I still drive that territory. I still run the same loop on the last Tuesday of every month. I just don't take Highway 9 after dark anymore. I add the time, and I take the long way, and I don't think about it too carefully. I've thought about going back to that station during the day to talk to the cashier, ask him what was actually happening that night and what he knew about the car on the shoulder and why a 1-pump gas station in Fulton County needs a road camera pointed at the highway. I haven't been back, and the longer I wait, the less I think I'm going to. I want to be clear about something before I start. I'm not someone who panics on the road. I've been driving solo for years. Long drives, night drives, unfamiliar routes. I'm an attorney. I practice contract litigation. My entire career is built on reading situations accurately and not reacting to surface impressions when the underlying facts haven't been established. I'm telling you that because what I'm about to describe could very easily sound like overreaction from someone who spooked themselves on a dark highway. I want you to understand why it wasn't that. I was driving I-40 west from Amarillo toward Albuquerque on a night in late September. Solo drive. I'd done the same route twice before for depositions in Albuquerque, and I'd driven it once during the day and once at night. I knew the stretch. The part between the Texas state line and the New Mexico border is about 200 miles of flat, dark highway with exits every 30 to 40 miles and almost nothing at most of them. No lighting, no cell signal in patches. If something goes wrong out there, you're aware of your options before they become relevant. The blowout happened about 40 miles east of the New Mexico line, just past a rest area I'd already passed. I felt the rear tire go that distinct pull and shudder, and I got the car onto the shoulder safely. Checked the surroundings, dark in every direction. Faint light from the last exit behind me, too far to walk. I had a spare in the trunk, and I know how to use it, but the shoulder was too narrow to work safely, and I wasn't comfortable with the traffic coming past at speed. I called AAA at 11:47. The representative told me the estimated wait was 90 minutes. I settled in, turned on my hazard lights, stayed in the car with the doors locked, because that's the protocol. You don't stand outside your vehicle on an interstate shoulder at night if you have any choice. 12 minutes later, a tow truck pulled up behind me. I clocked the time because I'd been watching my phone. 11:47 to 11:59. 12 minutes. The driver got out and came to my window. He was maybe 40, work jacket, no uniform. His truck was a standard flatbed, white. When he said my name, my first name, not just ma'am, I asked him how he had it. He said AAA sends the customer name with the dispatch. That's true. AAA does that. I know because I'd been dispatched before and the driver had used my name then too. So I accepted it and got out to talk to him. The first thing I noticed was the truck's door. No company name. Most roadside assistance vehicles have a full door wrap. Company name, license number, phone number, DOT number. This truck had a magnetic sign attached below the window that said roadside assist in black letters on a white background. The sign was slightly crooked, the kind of crooked that happens when you put something on in a hurry in the dark. He told me the tire was too far gone to change on the shoulder and he'd need to tow me to a shop. I told him I had a full-size spare in the trunk. He crouched down to look at the blown tire and said the rim was damaged and the spare wouldn't seat properly. He said the shop was just off the next exit, 20 minutes. I said I wanted to see the rim myself. He pointed a flashlight at it. I crouched down. The rim looked fine to me. Scuffed from the blowout, nothing bent, nothing cracked. I told him it looked fine. He said damage like that isn't always visible to the untrained eye. I've seen enough expert witness testimony to know what someone sounds like when they're manufacturing uncertainty. I stepped back toward my car and took out my phone. Called AAA back. The representative checked my account and told me their truck had not yet been dispatched. The driver assigned to my call was still 40 minutes out. I looked at the tow truck driver. He was watching me. Not impatiently, not nervously, just watching. I told him that AAA said they hadn't dispatched anyone yet. He held the look for a moment. His expression didn't shift. He said, "Yeah, I know." That's what he said. Not a denial, not an explanation, just, "Yeah, I know." I got back in my car. I hit the door locks and I leaned on the horn. Not panicked, sustained and deliberate, the kind of noise that carries. He didn't come toward the car. He stood next to his truck, hands at his sides, watching my windshield. I kept the horn going and I had my phone out with 911 already typed, and I watched him through the glass. He stood there for 3 minutes and 52 seconds. I know because I was counting. Then he got back in his truck and drove away, not toward the next exit, back the way he'd come, east. AAA's truck arrived 34 minutes later. Real truck, full door wrap, 2 drivers. I told them what had happened, and the driver on the left said, "Third time in 2 months on this stretch." He said it like he was tired of saying it. A tow truck showing up on this section of I-40 before the legitimate service, offering to take the stranded driver, usually female, always solo, to a shop at an exit just ahead. No one had followed it because it never committed a violation they could act on. It pulled over. It offered help. It left when the driver declined. The police told me the same thing when I filed the report the next morning. Third confirmed incident in 8 weeks. The exit it referenced, they said, the one where the shop supposedly was, had a fuel station and a fast food restaurant. No auto shop, no garage, no mechanic, nothing. No one has found out where the truck goes when it leaves with someone, because no one it's taken has reported back. I want to be upfront. I don't pick up hitchhikers. I never have. I've been driving work vans for 15 years, commercial electrical work, job site to job site, sometimes 3 or 4 stops in a day. You see people on the side of the road and you keep moving. That's not callousness. That's just the habit you build. Responsibility of the vehicle, liability, all of it. The reason I stopped that afternoon was the rain and the baby. I was driving a company van, a white Transit, no windows in the back, magnetic signs on the doors with the company name, northwest on Route 54 outside of Chillicothe, Missouri, heading to close out a job I'd finished that morning before the weather came in. It was maybe 4:30, 4:45 in the afternoon, and the rain was heavy enough that I had my wipers on high, and I was watching the road the way you watch it when visibility drops. The woman was standing next to a sedan with its hazard lights on, pulled off to the right. She was holding a baby, or what looked like a baby, bundled in a blanket against the rain, not sheltering under the car or in it, just standing there on the shoulder in the downpour. No umbrella, no jacket that I could see. I slowed down and stopped about 30 feet past her and put my own hazards on. She came up to the passenger window and I lowered it. The first thing she said wasn't "thank you," and it wasn't "my car broke down." The first thing she said when she looked in through the window was my first name, not "sir," my name. I'd never seen this woman before. My name is not on the van. It's the company name on those magnetic signs, not my name. I'm not wearing a name tag. There is no way she knew my name. I asked her what she'd said. She said it again. My name. Said it like she was confirming something, not like she was surprised by it. Said it with a kind of flatness that I've spent a long time since then trying to describe. And the closest I can get is the way you'd say the name of something you've been looking at on a map before you arrive at it. I should have driven away, I know that, but it was raining and she was on the side of the road and she had what looked like an infant. And whatever my brain was trying to tell me about how wrong this was, the other thing was also true. I couldn't drive away from a woman and a baby in the rain on Route 54 because she said something strange. That's not who I am. She asked if I'd take her to the next town. I said yes, and she got in. The baby carrier went in her lap. It was one of those bucket-style infant seats with the handle over the top, a thick-knit blanket over the whole thing. She held it steady with both hands. She gave me directions. Straight on Route 54 for the first few miles. That was fine. Then she said to take a left on County Road F. That's where I started paying attention because County Road F runs south and the next town is northwest. I asked her to confirm the direction and she said yes, that road, that turn. County Road F becomes a gravel road within about 2 miles. Then it's a gravel track that gets narrower. I drove it for maybe 10 minutes before I said, I didn't think this was going to the next town. She said to keep going, said her house was just ahead. The baby had not made a single sound or movement the entire drive. 11 or 12 minutes in the van, and the carrier hadn't shifted. The blanket over the top hadn't moved. No sound at all. Not sleeping sounds, not breathing sounds, nothing. I've been around enough kids in my life to know that infants make noise. They shift. They breathe loud enough that you can hear it in a quiet car. This carrier was completely still. I asked if the baby was okay. She didn't look down at the carrier. She said, fine. Not like she was reassuring me, like she was answering a question about the weather. We came to a house, single story, set back off the gravel road, maybe 50 feet, no lights on inside, no other vehicles in the gravel turnout out front. She said this was hers and to pull in. I stopped the van, but I did not pull in. She said she wanted me to come inside and wait until the rain let up. I said I needed to get back on the road. What happened then is what I've turned over the most in the years since. The expression she'd been wearing the whole drive, that kind of careful, slightly worried look you put on when you need someone's help, dropped. Not slowly. It went away the way you'd take off a hat. Underneath it was something else. Not threatening, not panicked, flat. The way her voice had been flat when she said my name. Like she'd been running a process and the process hadn't worked and now she was accounting for it. She said, that's okay. We'll do this another way. She got out of the van. She went to the front door of the dark house and opened it. It wasn't locked. And she went inside and she left the door open behind her. She left the baby carrier on my passenger seat. I drove away. I want to say I made a calculated decision to leave, but it was faster than that. The door opened, she was out, and I had the van moving before I'd formed a complete thought about what to do. I got back to Route 54 and I drove north until I found a gas station with lights, and I pulled in. I sat in the parking lot for a while. Then I looked at the carrier. The blanket over the top was thick, wool or something close to it. I pulled it back. There was no baby. The carrier was weighted, heavy enough that I'd assumed there was a child in it for the entire drive. When I looked inside, I found 4 bags of sand packed into the seat, zip-tied together, the weight of a small infant. Maybe 7, 8 pounds. On top of the sand, folded once, was a piece of paper. My home address. My actual home address. Handwritten in pen. Not my work address, not the company. My house. Where I live. I called the police from the gas station parking lot. I gave them the location of the house on the gravel road off County Road F. I gave them the description of the woman and the sedan on Route 54. I gave them the carrier and the piece of paper. I moved 4 months later, not because the police told me to, because every morning I drove out of that neighborhood I thought about the flat expression when she said, "We'll do this another way," and I couldn't get comfortable with not knowing what the other way was. I still don't know how she had my name. I don't know if she had it before she flagged me down or if there's some part of this I'm not seeing. I don't know how she had my address or how long she'd had it. I don't know how many times she'd done this before or what happened the time someone got out of the van. The police didn't find her. They found the house. It was abandoned. Had been for years, according to the county records. I travel for work 3 or 4 times a year, mostly regional conferences and client meetings. I've rented cars from the same Enterprise location at Phoenix Sky Harbor probably 8 or 9 times. It's a routine. You know what routine does to your attention. You stop looking closely because there's nothing to see. I picked up the car on a Tuesday morning in March. The transaction was completely normal. Maybe 4 minutes at the counter, keys and a form, out to the lot. Mid-size sedan, black interior, smelled like the cleaning product they use between rentals. I loaded my bag in the trunk, got in, and pulled out of the lot. My first red light was maybe a quarter mile from the rental facility. I was going through my bags to make sure I had the client folder I'd packed the night before. While I was checking, I opened the center console. Then I opened the glove compartment. There was a phone in the glove compartment, not tucked away, just sitting there on top of the manual and the registration. Face up, the screen was on. I picked it up. The last visible text on the screen, in a thread with no name, just a number, said she just picked up the car. I want to be precise about what happened that moment because it's easy to summarize it as I was scared, and that's not quite right. What happened was more like watching all the furniture in a room shift 2 inches at once. Everything was exactly where it had been, and none of it was in the right place. I pulled into a gas station on the access road and sat with the phone. I scrolled back through the text thread, 34 messages spanning 3 days, all from the same number. The thread read like logs, short, factual, time-stamped. Most of them were about the car, when it was due back, when it was cleaned, when it was ready for pickup. And between those, physical descriptions, 4 of them. 4 different women described in enough detail that whoever had written them had seen these women in person. Height estimate, hair color, what they were wearing, whether they were alone. One of the descriptions was close enough to me. Right height, dark hair, business clothes, solo. I stopped on it. The phone buzzed in my hand. Same number. New message. Is she alone? I put the phone face down on the passenger seat. Then I picked it back up and looked at my rearview mirror. A silver sedan was behind me at the light I'd just left. When I'd pulled into the gas station, it had also pulled in. Not to a pump, just into the lot. It was sitting at the far end, engine running. I pulled back onto the access road and took the first right. The silver sedan followed. I took a second turn, then a third. Deliberate turns, not navigation. The sedan matched every one. When I slowed, its speed dropped to match. When I held the lane, it held the lane. It maintained exactly the same distance behind me for 11 blocks. I drove to a police station, not the nearest one. I didn't know where the nearest one was. I just drove until I saw a building with a blue sign and a lit parking lot, and I pulled in. The silver sedan stopped across the street. The phone buzzed. She's at the police. Abort. I went inside and told an officer what had happened. I gave him the phone. The thread was all there. I hadn't deleted anything. He took it back to show someone else, and when he came back, there was a second officer with him. They kept the phone, told me not to discuss the details publicly while the investigation was active. What they did tell me, because I asked directly, and I'm not someone who leaves a police station without an answer, was that the phone was a prepaid burner purchased with cash, and that the text thread showed a pattern of coordinated surveillance using rental vehicles at Phoenix Sky Harbor. 14 women tracked over approximately 6 weeks. Descriptions, car descriptions, license plates, departure times. When they ran the thread through Enterprise's system, they found that 3 other phones had been recovered from returned rental vehicles in the past month. Same lot, same pattern. None of the phones had been reported by the previous renters, which means either they hadn't found them or they had and didn't know what they were looking at. They found the silver sedan abandoned in a parking structure near the airport 2 days later. The plates were stolen. no prints. I finished my work trip in a different rental from a different company. I paid out of pocket for a hotel room upgrade because I wanted the extra security chain on the door. I slept fine. I don't scare easily, and I knew I was safe. But I've thought about this every time I've gotten into a rental car since then. And I've checked every glove compartment before I leave the lot, and I always will. What I think about most is the 14 women. 6 weeks' worth of descriptions, coordinates, car types. Someone was spending real time and real effort on this. The phones were planted before the cars were cleaned and returned, meaning someone with access to those vehicles or knowledge of when they'd be ready was putting burners in the glove box and waiting for the next pickup. They still haven't arrested anyone. The phones are evidence. The descriptions are evidence. The silver sedan is evidence. Somewhere in Phoenix, someone looked at their phone, saw the word abort, and walked away, and is probably still walking around. In Montana, waving on back roads is just something you do. Not a big wave, just a lift of 2 fingers off the steering wheel when another vehicle passes going the opposite direction. It's a habit that survives from when the roads were empty enough that you knew the other driver probably lived within 30 miles of where you did, and the wave was acknowledgement of that. I grew up with it, I work in it. I'm a park ranger, off duty that day, but still, I know those back roads the same way I know the park units I manage, personally, in detail. The route I was driving that afternoon was a county road west of the park boundary, heading toward a hardware store in the nearest town. About 40 miles total. 2 lanes, no shoulder, scrub pine on both sides. No traffic to speak of. I'd driven it probably 200 times. There's nothing on it for most of its length. A ranch turnoff every several miles, a Forest Service access gate about halfway through. The road runs straight north to south. It doesn't loop. The white truck passed me about 8 miles in, going the opposite direction, south while I was going north. I gave the 2-finger wave. He waved back. Normal. 3 miles later, heading north, the white truck passed me again going south. Roads in that area do have occasional spurs, turnoffs for ranch access, forest roads, and I assumed he'd taken one and doubled back. I didn't think much about it. Gave the 2-finger wave again. He waved back. 2 miles after that, the white truck passed me again going south. I did the math. For the truck to have passed me 3 times going south while I was traveling north on a road with no loop, he had to have turned around twice. That means somewhere behind me, twice, a truck had turned around on a road narrow enough that doing so requires using someone's ranch drive. That's not impossible, but it's not nothing either. I was 3 miles from a scenic turnout I use sometimes when I'm checking fence lines, a flat gravel area overlooking a valley. I pulled in and stopped, looked at the view, gave myself 60 seconds to think. The white truck passed the turnout going north. He was behind me now, going my direction. He slowed when he passed, not much, maybe 5 miles an hour below the road speed, and I couldn't see the driver clearly. The truck continued north, and I watched it in my rear view until it went around a bend in the road. I pulled back out and continued north. About a quarter mile later, I saw brake lights ahead. The white truck had done a U-turn. It was now behind me again, and it stayed behind me. Not close, maybe 200 yards back. Consistent. When I slowed for a dip in the road, the truck slowed. When I accelerated out of it, the truck accelerated. The distance held. Exactly. I have training in reading situations without escalating them. Part of the job, you encounter people in the backcountry who are agitated, who are carrying weapons, who are on property they're not supposed to be on, and you learn how to stay measured when your instinct is to react. What I was doing in the next few miles was not staying measured. I was keeping my eyes on my rear view and running through what options I had. The Forest Service station was 11 miles north. I knew the 2 rangers working that day. I drove the 11 miles and turned into the station lot and parked. The white truck drove past slowly. The driver, male, I could see that much, but not his face, turned his head toward the station building as he passed. He held it for a beat, then continued north. I went inside. The ranger at the desk, someone I've known for 6 years, looked up and asked if everything was okay. I described the truck. He got quiet in a particular way. He said, That truck's been going back and forth on this road for about 3 days. Every time it passes here, it slows down. He said it not like it was alarming, like it was a thing he'd been deciding whether to do something about. We ran the plate. The truck had been reported stolen 3 weeks earlier from a ranch about 200 miles southeast. The owner of the ranch, a man in his early 60s who'd worked that property for 30 years, had been reported missing to the county sheriff 11 days ago. The truck thief and the missing ranch owner were 2 different people. No matches. We called the county sheriff's office. They sent a deputy out to look for the truck, but by then it was gone. They'd had no reports of the white truck before that day, at least not on that road. The truck hasn't been found. The ranch owner hasn't been found. What I keep thinking about is what the ranger said. 3 days. The truck had been going back and forth on that road for 3 days before I ever drove it. Back and forth, every few hours, slowing when it passed the station, waving at the vehicles it passed. A stolen truck on a remote county road in Montana for 3 days without anyone calling it in is not unusual. Most of those calls never happen. People mind their own business. The wave is part of that. It's a signal of normalcy. I belong here. You wave back and you drive on and you don't think about it. I've thought about the 4 times he waved at me. All 4 times I waved back. That's what you do. That's the habit. I wonder how many other drivers waved back and then forgot about it by the time they got where they were going. I wonder if that's exactly what he was counting on. If you notice the thread connecting all 5 stories, that every single thread wore the face of something you'd normally trust, smash that like button, subscribe so the next one finds you, and let me know, which story are you still thinking about? And if you thought lonely highways were the scary part, wait until you're surrounded by trees and silence and the sound of something moving just outside the fire. Click now to watch 4 disturbing camping horror stories. Because the dark looks different when there's no road to drive away on. Thanks for watching. Stay alert, stay safe, and I'll see you in the next nightmare.